put this. There we go. Okay, so yes, like I said, this is the spoken word and speech language pathology presentation. So today I'm gonna talk about hypothetical therapy approach, which is really the amalgamation of these two aspects. And I'm also gonna talk about the workshops that I've been able to develop as like a pilot program at Lehman currently. So to further introduce myself, okay. So I do have the club at Lehman. I'm the president and the founder of the Spoken Word and Speech Language Pathology Club. I'm also a spoken word artist, like I went over, and I'm a master's student at Lehman College. So we are going to talk about the club and what we've been able to do. I don't necessarily have a whole bunch of footage. We do have a lot of, we have a lot of media on our Instagram page. So it really speaks for itself. So I will be more than glad with sharing that Instagram page so that you guys can actually see what we do. Okay, so I was going to submit this for the call of action for the ASHA. Leslie Grubler, our director of the clinic, she was like, Makeda, you have to put this idea together and you need to send it into ASHA for the ASHA convention. So this is really, you're getting the presentation here of what I really would have presented at the ASHA convention, of course, if I was chosen to present. So we do have learner outcomes. You can read along to these. This is more or less something that was criteria for that, but I think it was helpful to have it have it still in the presentation. Okay, so speech language pathology. I will say I've always struggled academically, and I don't think it was necessarily because I wasn't smart enough. It was because, well, first of all, I started kindergarten at 4 years old. So cognitively, I just wasn't as developed as most of my peers. So I was always playing catch up. And that's kind of what I got used to, is always feeling like I had to play catch up, or I was always behind, and or I just, I don't know, things just didn't click as fast as it did for other people around me. So it was really significant when I found speech language pathology, because it was something that didn't necessarily come easy to me, but I just felt like I didn't have to work hard, or it didn't feel like I was working hard. Maybe a little bit in the master's program, but in undergrad, it was so much fun. I'm not saying that's not fun now, but it was like one of those, it was just a breath of fresh air for me to actually get into something and be captivated, and it really maintained my attention. All the classes I enjoy, especially linguistics. So after thinking and declaring my major and saying this is something that I'm really interested in doing, I was like, but how am I going to tailor it to me? Like I gotta be me in this. I'm that individual that really likes to, I don't know, I guess choose a different path, I would say. I don't want to sound too cliche, but it's true. So I decided that I would love to develop some type of specialization within this magical field of speech language pathology to help redefine what we do. So just help redefine, not redefine in totality, but to help redefine. So the radical idea came where I was like, let's put the speech language pathology and let's put poetry together, and bada bing, bada boom, let's get it started. So before I move to the next slide, I'm just giving you a background story because we are all human here. And I want to give a very vulnerable, well, not very vulnerable, but a vulnerable, history of why poetry means so much to me, and why I felt like it was something that I couldn't cast away as just a hobby. You know what I'm saying? Like, just, okay, I do poetry on the side, but I'm a speech language pathologist. I really wanted to be able to incorporate these two elements together because that's how passionate I am about poetry and spoken word. So I remember I woke up in the middle of the night. I was about 15 years old, and literally the pen just started to move. Now that's something that I feel like if you know any writers or poets, most people are going to say that. They're gonna be like, I don't know what happened. It was just one night or one moment in my life. I just started to write and I could not stop. And I don't think they've coined it like to be some type of phenomena yet, but it's real. And then you'll be writing, and then words will be coming and flowing, and you're like, I don't even know that word, but it makes sense in the poem. How did that happen? This is magic. And that's when I was like, this is something right here. I found something. And it became my outlet through depression. I was very depressed in high school, and this was something that I poured everything into. Many people know me now, and when I tell them that I didn't talk in high school, You know what I'm saying? Like they are like, you know, they're flabbergasted. That's the only word I can use right now to really describe how people are like, Makeda, that's not even you. I can't even imagine you not talking. I'm like, and most people know that speech language pathologists love to talk. So this was something that I was using for that. And so I was going, Professor Seymour Collins, she asked me to actually present or to share a piece with you guys, but I decided that I wanted to share a piece of mine that I've written personally, but I decided to share a piece that we actually conducted together in an adult neuro clinic. Not necessarily, not Professor Seymour, but my group at Lehman College in our section in adult neuro clinic. In my last semester of clinic, we had 30-minute group sessions, and I think we had 6 clients that day in our group session. And I decided to pose the question, hey, let's create. What do you guys do? You like poetry, you know? And nobody really raised their hand. I think 2 people raised their hands, and I was like, well, we're going to write a poem today. We're gonna make a poem today. So I'm gonna break down how we did that and just to give you some just to be able to contextualize what I mean and how this can be embedded into therapy. So we started off with, and this is how my workshops work when I'm in workshops for my club working with students. So we say, hey, just throw out a random word. Now, for this adult neuro group, two of the clients are nonverbal, so they can't just throw out a word. You know what I'm saying? So one client had to throw out a word that was kind of contextual with, well, actually, no. Nobody actually threw out a word except one person, and that person had dysarthria. He threw out the word heaven. So if you look at the title, that was from him. Okay, so then we said, all right, well, if no one else can think of an independent word of heaven or something that's different from that, let's try some SFA. Let's try some semantic feature analysis, and let's kind of pull from heaven and see what kind of words we can get. So then it was easier for them to pull words from heaven. They just needed a direction. So then we got words like paradise. We got words like, we got oasis. We had rainbow. We had happiness. All these words that sound and feel like heaven. And so we had a client who was nonverbal and did not have his AAC device with him. He is like, no, when I'm in group, I want to be completely independent. I want to, if you don't understand what I'm saying, you're gonna have to take the time to understand what I'm saying. So he was using gestures, you know, he was pulling like phonemically, he would probably pull like a cluster, or maybe he would get one word out and we would all have to kind of work together to figure out what he's saying until he gave us, you know, he affirmed that that's what he was trying to say. One client, she was nonverbal, she had aphasia and apraxia. And so she had to use her AAC device. So I told her, I was like, yo, just use a word generator, go to Google, because she uses her phone, use a randomized word generator and keep pressing the button, you know, the randomizer button until you find a word that you like. So she would stop, she would press it over and over again, find a word that she liked, and then she would point to it, show me her phone. And those are the words that we would use. So we got a good sum of words. And then the rest of it was, okay, we have words now. Who's going to make our lines? We need to make lines to this poem. So the one guy who was like, I asked him in the beginning of the session, I was like, who likes poetry? This was the only guy. The guy was like, nah, I don't like poetry. Nah, it's not for me. He was the biggest contributor to this poem. He had, I mean, there's at least 4 or 5 lines in here that he gave by himself. I have the video of this session on Course. I haven't downloaded it yet, but it is saved to our system. And I haven't put it here simply because I don't think that you can embed it on the PowerPoint because of how Course is set up. We can't really watch videos outside of the Wi-Fi on campus. But it is there. And I think that maybe I'll screen record it one day so that I can actually put it up on possibly YouTube. But yeah, so you see how like everything is working out. If you've taken the time to actually look at the poem, I'll read it out to you very quickly. But this is one of the biggest moments. This was a huge moment in the clinic. Everyone was excited when it happened, when I told them how it worked. And it affirmed me in what I was doing. And I was like, okay, like everyone was able to use their strengths to be able to express themselves creatively. And when I read out the poem to them, it was very emotional. The environment, the space that we were sharing was very heavy, but in a good way. it was like, it just felt like, wow, I just did that. I never thought I could do that. Kind of, that's how it felt to me. And I feel like that's what they were trying to express and the energy that was going on in the environment. So this poem is called Heaven. So heaven can wait. Paradise in the sunset, forbidden oasis in the desert, ocean blue in the sky. It makes me want to fly. The drama of you and I. So these two lines where you see Hannah and Tatiana, this Hannah was the co-student clinician and Tatiana was the social work intern. So these are the only two lines that weren't from our clients, okay? So the drama of you and I. My heart feels light, eternally yours. The rainbow colors my eyes. The scent of you as a woman. Happiness makes me reminisce about the first time I felt your kiss, the inhale of a flower petal. So this last sentence I fixed a little bit syntactically because the individual that contributed was our nonverbal client. And he literally I think somebody had said flowers or something like that when we were doing the SFA to pull from heaven. And he started to bring he brought flour, he started to bring it to his hand, he started to do this. He was like this. He was like, and so we were like, okay, so we're flour, we got the flour, you're inhaling. He was like, yes, so from there we were able to kind of like, and I read him the last line and he gave me the thumbs up. So I was like, okay, we're staying with that. Okay, so actually, before I move on to that, how do you guys feel about the poem? I would love to hear like any feedback from that.
I personally love the poem. This is Ayodele. I felt that like language is language, whether it's language with a person who's lost their language due to aphasia or a person who was born with certain deficits, like developmental losses. I felt it's so pertinent that you could use, like say with my kids, I'm thinking maybe I should throw some poetry in there because that would teach figurative language. That would teach rhyme. That rhyme. I'm talking rhyme for reading, not rhyme for rhyming.
Right.
But
Yeah.
rhyme for reading.
Right.
So I was blown away by the poem, and I was blown away that despite a person losing their certain abilities, that they remembered the human experience and that they remembered like a woman and things like that. That that there is great hope because America's out of shape. There's a chance I could be a stroke and I could be a person who has a stroke. So that even in that we still have our humanity and that there are people that are going to work with us and help us. It like because we had Derek can tell you, we had a speech therapist that did have a stroke. And she told us all the people that worked with her. And that's powerful because when I was at Howard University, there was a professor from UDC who had lost so many abilities. And one of the students, like, it hurt her. And it hurts all of us to see somebody who was so like a lion at one time, broken down, that there's still the humanity that they're wounded, but they're okay.
And and that's why I feel like I think my professor, my last clinical educator, she had stated that this creative expression is a form of functional communication.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's like, and this is why, this approach or any approach where you are inciting expressive language is needed, especially when it's done in a more in-depth way. Because I had a client and he wasn't talking to his wife, and it wasn't because he didn't want to, but he felt like if he got into a conversation with her, he just couldn't go as far with her as he could beforehand, before the stroke. Like he couldn't get in depth. He wasn't even able to argue because he couldn't bring up points to make his, to justify his side, so he just remained quiet instead because he couldn't meet her where she was linguistically. And I just thought that was one of those ways where in this kind of situation, if you have somebody that's constantly expressing themselves creatively, maybe, just maybe, it may help that functional communication when it comes to in-depth conversations that are meaningful, especially when we're talking.
For sure. That's where, like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
say I don't have any
Yeah.
evidence based, but for sure, like say as a young child, right?
Hmm.
I was born in the 70s.
Okay.
So I don't have all that data, but as a part of my education, poetry was a part of it. And in my as a child, I used to write poetry, and it really helped me express. And right now, I know older people who have lost their ability to drive and stuff just to aging and loss of eyesight and all that stuff,
Hmm.
who now they've gone into their creative side, and that's what keeps you going.
Mm.
I don't have data
Yeah.
because I didn't look into the research,
We're
but
gonna we'll talk about
I'm
that.
sure
We'll
it
talk.
works. I'm sure it works.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's like a no-brainer, it's just one of those things that I think it's just super, I don't know, clinical. And I guess that clinical mind is like not creative or
No,
it
but
just,
everybody knows, like now studies are showing that just exercise helps you. So of course, if you could like express yourself poetically or artistically,
Mhm.
that's going to help you. And,
Right.
and and I definitely agree. Like say having it sparked my mind. It really sparked my mind, even for low level readers, to do
Right.
that rhyming at the beginning and the end of a phrase. That's going to
Yeah.
improve literacy, everything. So I would like to see what research shows for that.
Yeah. 100%.
Excuse me, I'm at a semi-family function. So if the noise gets loud, you know how your people.
You good, you're good. This is our month, you know what I'm saying? So to conclude, I from the poem and from the conversation, I think that the vision of what I'm doing is more clear than ever. I don't really have to go deep into this slide per se. But I do think that it should be inclusive to those who have communication disorders and those who aren't. So we're talking about caregivers, we're talking about spouses, we're talking about parents, things of that nature. When we're in therapy sessions, it should be inclusive to them, because this is something that this is something that can also transfer into the home, and practices that can be developed and things of that nature.
But quite seriously, at the next Asha, you present this, and if you need help, no, seriously, because why? Like say, the black perspective is missing in Asha,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the artistic part is. Mom, get out of here.
I agree.
Artistic perspective is missing.
I
So
agree.
present. If you need help, I will help you, because
Wow.
that's what I'm here for.
I appreciate that. I would
But
love, yeah.
it's up to you, because I
Yeah.
know
I mean,
your
I mean,
personal.
I definitely submitted it last year. So I don't know when the deadline is. I know it's springtime, so it's coming up soon.
Okay,
But
so then we'll
yeah.
see. We'll see. If you need any assistance, I'll be there.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Because this is so pertinent. This is pertinent to everyone. Because as human beings, artistry is a part of what separates us from animals, right?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
we're animals,
yeah.
but
That's a great
we're not
point. I should put
animals.
that in the presentation.
I mean, we're animals, but we're like the special animal.
We are special. We are
Yes.
special, and yeah. So I think that, okay, and I think that when I don't know if it was you per se, but I know that somebody was talking about how they could incorporate this with their students or with their kids.
Mhm.
So I just kind of lay down the overlap between speech language pathology and spoken word, and what you could really be working on. And I came to pragmatics, linguistics, superlinguistics, nonverbal communication, and fluency, and I'm sure that the list goes on from there.
Fluency for sure. Because with
Mhm.
the reading, a lot of reading teachers right now, because we're just trying to help their kids just read. The fluency component, people are looking over, and thank goodness New York City, they have a program where they're looking at fluency as a part of reading.
Yeah.
Because if you don't read with the expression, the content is missed.
Right. Exactly. And
If
that
you're
is
reading like every word like 10
right.
seconds
You just
apart,
monotone.
you miss what they said.
Exactly. I had one of the client that I had that had dysarthria. This was something we were using poetry
Mm-hmm.
to elicit him for just intonation changes. You know what I'm saying? I was like,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
feel it, but
Exactly.
how are you going to how are you going to convey that feeling to me? How are you going to let me know that this is what you mean, or this is how you feel about what you're speaking about? So we had to get, I had him reciting Toni Morrison, because her stuff is super emotional, and I don't think that you can read it without, you know, pouring into yourself. So
Good
he
point.
had to
I'm
challenge us.
glad you brought that up to me. That maybe I need to bring up things that emote emotion to my
Yes,
students.
yes. I think that is something where
Because you know
feeling
that'll
while they're
that
reading it.
sometimes our reading level is not just our reading level. Sometimes it's what intrigues us.
Want what you want, yes, and with some type of relation, some type of commonality, you know, that you feel with what you're reading, you know, if you don't feel connected to it.
I forget what is it called, the time thing when you're playing the piano, the timer, because they use that with people who
The
stutter.
metronome,
The metronome, that helps because you have to have the rhythm.
we use that.
Sometimes
I've
the
used that. I
kids
used that
are
first
missing the
semester.
metronome.
Hmm.
But I'm gonna shut up right now and I'm gonna
I
be
really
quiet.
appreciate.
And my
I want.
business and let you go on with your
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you. I don't, I love having, I listen, if I didn't have to go to this, if I didn't want to go to this basketball game, I would hold this conversation. I do like to conduct discussions. I don't want this
No,
just
no,
to.
go on with your presentation. I'm gonna be
Yes,
quiet
ma'am.
right now. I'm
Yes,
gonna
ma'am.
listen.
All right. Let's get it on. Okay. So this vision, I had to make it concrete. Well, you know, believe it or not, it was my therapist. My therapist was like, Makeda, you've been talking about it for weeks now. Just go out and do it. And I was like, Wendy, you know, I just started the master's program. Like, what do I look like starting a whole club? And she was like, just do it. And I was like, all right. So I went out and I did what I had to do. And I was like, this was in my mind. I'm like, this is intentional. I'm doing this because I do want students of Lehman College to be able to come to a place that's safe for them. I mean, individuals that usually wouldn't be in a poetry scene, for these individuals to feel safe to be here. And this is also a pilot for me to see how well this works, to see how well people take this. So the workshop was created, and we have conducted, I think we've conducted at least from last spring to fall, we've conducted about 12 workshops, and we had an open mic last in the fall. We had our key feature. He was a person who stutters, and he is also a rapper. He was fantastic. It was his first paid gig, and that was the other thing, is I was able to pay this performer to perform and also share his story. So it turned into something way bigger than I expected. So we developed a mission statement. This is my logo. So I don't know if it's going to transfer over to what I do professionally or if it stays at Lehman, but if you see this logo, know that it's me. The mission statement that we developed, this club. So this is what we disseminated to Lehman and the students and all little bureaucratic pieces that we had to fill out and things of that nature. So the club is a safe space for individuals with communication disorders, anxiety disorders, and those who struggle speaking publicly. And the poetic objective of the club is to feel safe in speaking your mind. The subject of your poetry is your choice, and we just ask you to be you, essentially. And man, did the students eat it up. It was something that, it was like, I didn't even know this existed, and it was something that I needed. And you can imagine the desire to join something like this right after COVID, because I started this club right when we came back on campus. So it really was received very well by more students than I thought. So we have a vice president. Her name is Karan Hinton. She is the tongue twister master. She's currently in her BA at Lehman. Najma, she was our workshop curator. She pretty much took all of the ideas that we created, all the activities, because we don't just do spoken word. We also do activities that are the kind of the buildup for it, whether it be tongue twisters, whether it be rhyme schemes, whether it be activity, like, vocal activities and things of that nature. She brings all of these pieces and makes an itinerary, makes a plan on how we are going to do the workshop, 15 minutes to 15 minutes to 15 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever it is. That's she did that. And then we had G Young, which hooked up our social media page. We don't have 1,000 followers, but I take a lot of pride in our page, because it is unique in its own, and it's very warm, and it just speaks for itself, honestly, in my opinion. And she has everything to do with that. So Franchelli, she was a person that came out. She was one who was engaging with everybody on campus. Hey, what about our club? Let us know, And she was also the assistant social media strategist. And they all have their own little nicknames that I came up with. being the person I am. So of course, like I kept saying, inclusivity is a big one. You know, because the biggest piece is that I don't want marginalization. I don't want, this is why we're talking about, it's bridging the gap in every intersectionality, bridging the gap between spoken word, speech language pathology, bridging the gap between races, bridging the gap between disabilities, neurotypical, neurodivergent, things of all of this. And the list goes on. So just a true representation of the world. That's what we really are going for. And if you realize, if you looked at the names of the ladies that were on our board, it was a very diverse group of women that were coming together to create this club. And I had nothing to do with that. These individuals are just very excited to hop on board with this idea. So I really want to go over this very quickly with you guys. I thought this was really interesting. So this is the history of, and this is kind of going into the disability affirmative piece. So I kind of picked up this excerpt. I was looking for something that kind of went over the history of speech language pathology. And so this author was specifically talking about affluent history, you know, how America kind of posed this idea that there was once a time where there were no stutterers and there was no speech disorders and no one had aphasia and language, you know, and language disorders and things of that nature. And now this is new and it needs to be corrected because we need to go back. We need to be just like we were before. And this is what he considered an ableist abstraction that was set intentionally, politically, and, you know, normalized because I think it was one of these things where America was booming after the Industrial Revolution and you wanted some uniformity. You wanted people to sound like they came from a place. Oh, we know you're American. And the danger of this fluent history is that, you know, it took away, it took away the fact, or it really kind of erases the history of aphasia and stuttering, and treats them like they weren't existent or they weren't in existence prior. And it does affect our community. It does affect everyone in a way where I have aphasia. My life, who am I? What is my life? I am not who I was before. You know, and I know that if you have worked with the adult population specifically, you know that this takes a mental toll on, it will take a mental toll on anyone. But it doesn't help that society barely knows what aphasia is. I mean, outside of the speech language pathology world and maybe in the medical field, aphasia is an unknown. I mean, most people don't know what that is. So they know what a stroke is, but they don't know that it can cause aphasia. So this thing that happens is something that's almost, it's a quiet, insidious thing. And society is unaware of it's going on, or for the most part. And then also history is not supporting this person because it's also built on this speech correction. You need to sound like this. You need to be able to be a citizen, or, you know, or that's not the word that I'm looking for, but you guys understand what I mean by, you know, being an active participant in society. And it kind of takes away from that. So this was interesting to me. I didn't really look at it that way, as, you know, like this made up history lesson, you know, to justify that we needed speech correction in America. So I also looked up Asha's definition of speech language pathologists, and I put it here. So it says that SLPs work to prevent, assess, diagnose, and treat speech language, social communication, cognitive communication, and swallowing disorders in children and adults. And I was like, wait a minute, there's some things missing. What about affirm and advocate and normalize? What about these three words? How about that? Because we do that. I know every one of you do this. I know that Latavia does this. Advocate, affirm, and normalize. So you speak about it. We've spoken about it. So, you know, why isn't it in the definition of speech language pathologist on asha.org? So I'd like to challenge that. So this is my boy Sean. He goes by s.com. This is a pretty lengthy video. Let me see what time we have. It's like 7 minutes, I think. Let me see how many slides we have after this. Okay, not too many. All right, so I'm gonna let most of this rock. I may speed through it a little bit. Let me know if you guys can hear it, because I did have issues with the audio before. And excuse me, I was like super nervous and
Hey y'all, we're here on 161 at the Yankee Tavern.
can you guys hear it?
Really famous It's been here for forever. And I had the joy of actually interviewing a close friend of mine. My name is
Can you guys hear it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Pyles. I'm a speech language pathology master student here at Lehman, and I'm also an employee at Lehman. And today I actually got the chance to interview a close friend of mine that I mentioned previously. His name is Sean Reed, and he goes by the alias of S.com. That's his for alias. And we actually talked about his stutter and yeah.
I mean, my grandma was just stuttered. My mother stuttered. I stuttered. My daughter stuttered. And son stuttered. But in school, I was always afraid to speak or read. I would look at my teacher like, not telling me to read. That's real.
Sorry that, yeah.
Not telling me to read. You know what I'm saying? But I'm always like, I play basketball for the school. Like,
Really?
I mean, seriously, but they will. They would never like say no to me. You know, yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it was just like, but
That was his sister.
I mean, that's honor goes to my baby's up. Honor every time. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Honor goes
Okay. Wow.
like that. You know what I mean?
That's good. All right. So, how did you overcome the challenges of being misunderstood and unheard?
Wow, this school had a piece, the therapist that would come and get me like, maybe like 2 o'clock, 3 times a week, 2 o'clock. So you have like, stop my leg and want to make a beat, and I'm like, when I'm talking,
Yeah.
you want me to
Yeah, that's the thing that we learned.
like, I was like, yo,
Syllables and everything.
yeah, you know what I mean? So it was like that. And then that's how, and that's how I started rapping. That's how I started doing my beats and myself. Yeah, like, and then,
So it's speech therapy that.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So how did you learn to accept your stutter?
When I started rapping, like, my first brother, he was a basketball player, and I played ball. And they always compare me to him. And I'm like, yo, I'm competing streetball legend. I'm like, yo, I can't go compete with him. So I found another stage. And rap shit was, you know what? I could do this shit. I'm ready to a nice snap. I snap. I could dish any kind of way I want.
Battle rap.
And I started rapping, and it was like, this is it. It's my own lane. You know what I mean?
And so, how far did you get in your rapping career?
Good deal. You know what I mean? I got a manager. I had a little deal. And
Yeah, like you dropped out some like favors.
I took the mixtape, a few EPs, and jam, and it's like, that's my outlet to let me not be afraid to speak. Because I could rap, and I could play film games. I did a whole lot of stuff that I can't deal with. That's why I told him it was great. But then the next morning, when I wake up, I feel like the same as them.
So I'm gonna skip to the part where he actually starts rapping, so that you guys can hear. I think that you guys are gonna be really impressed.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. I should know where part this is.
Thank you for coming there. Thank you so much, John. That's John, AKA.
DOTCOM, doing overtime, counting over.
Right, right. Excellent. All right, let's finish that break.
I'm so far ahead of my time. I'm still a little older. I raised the ground for the God, make us round for you. I'm gonna flow it from nobody. I'm sorry. The boy over 40, been nice saying for Tory. Rock the block parties, I shut it down in the club scene. Chicks was fucking, dicks was fucking, pick who was fucking, stickers we love me. Not just in there for that sticks in the 20s. Same way I shift gears, that's how I switch gears. Ain't nothing bitch here, especially that pivot air. Pivot clear, just here with the kids, yeah. My ears, they got it clear. No BBS for the real. I'm low in that horse wagon, pants sagging. Everything in that car except for a bathroom. I won't battle with you niggas ain't paying them. The rap game champion, 16s like handguns. Lock you both up.
All right. So he gets pretty heavy, but this was I run into him like almost every week. And I've actually showed this video to plenty of people in our department at Lehman College. I've gotten a lot of praise from it. And he's gotten a lot of praise. And I think that he just showcases the need for it. And this is at an adult level. So you can imagine what it would do for a child. So I really want to hear your thoughts on the video, but I do want to blow past this presentation so we can come back to that if anything. Okay. So so this is the neglected perspective. Very quickly on disability affirmation. I know that you guys are more than aware of this. Are probably more than aware of this. I have two quotes here. This author, the first quote talks about how disability affirmation predicts hope amongst adults with physical disabilities. And I think it does more than predicts hope. I think that it sets a tone for reality. I do think that humans are more capable of doing things than we yet understand. So I think that it kind of just opens the door to bigger possibilities. And then if you guys know Dr. Chris Constantino, he is a doctor in speech language pathology, and he also is a person who stutters. And I think that he said it pretty much best when it comes to fluency. He was like, there's nothing you can do to stop being a person who stutters. You have a choice. You can learn to live with it and speak as easily as you can and embrace this aspect of yourself and try to figure it out. Is there anything good about it? Or you can spend your whole life trying to fight it and being something that you aren't. And then this piece is about, so these are all components of the club. And when we talk about the environment and we talk about when we go back to Najma and her creating this workshop or creating the itinerary and how the actual workshop that day is going to play out, these components, disability affirmation, neurodiversity, are all, we literally have to have a sit down, a brainstorm on how we're going to be able to create a space where everyone is thought of. It is inclusive to anyone in how they learn or how they hear or how they would be able to communicate. So we take in consideration for all of these, or as much as we possibly can, that we're cognitive of, to incorporate into the workshop. So I have like these couple of phrases just to kind of say and put into the universe, because I think that this is what our future can look like. So I titled this slide "Changing the Mindset." So this is just hypothetical, all right? But think about it. Let's just say, from her experience living with apraxia, she became a patient listener and an excellent therapist, an excellent counselor. So like this is you taking something that you've probably struggled with your entire life, and through that you've developed another skill and you've become very strong in another skill, probably stronger than most. Another example is from his experience living with dyslexia. As a teacher, he specialized in creating specific curriculum for students learning with dyslexia. I feel like it is always better when someone is developing something from their own experiences rather than somebody from the outside, or like we're going back into the ableist approach, trying to create something where they don't have that perspective firsthand. I think that there's so much more for individuals that have that perspective or to live that life and had to go through those trials. They have such a wider space of contribution for individuals like that have similar disorders. And the last one is from her experience living with deafness as an SLP, she was able to specialize in treating awareness of nonverbal pragmatic cues for her deaf clients. So, or for clients in general, just because you're deaf doesn't necessarily mean that you're not hearing. but she was able, even clients that have, let's say, autism, that struggle with social pragmatics, teaching them how to read nonverbal cues, because I believe as an individual who is deaf, and speaking to someone who is not, that doesn't speak ASL, you have to pick up on these cues. You become a master of picking up on subtle emotional responses, involuntary gestures, things of that nature. You become like this. I think there's like an actual profession that specializes in being able to tell if you're lying by, like, you twitching your eye or looking to the left and things of that nature. So I can imagine that an individual that's been deaf their entire life and has been integrated into general society has become a master of this and can teach this and can also treat this for individuals that struggle with this. So this is just an idea, and this is definitely what I mean, or these are examples of disability affirmative mindset. So going back to research, of course, if I decide to get my PhD, this is what I'm going to go for. I'm going to back that this is evidence-based, that this can be an evidence-based practice. So effectiveness of this approach, or so the possible research question: effectiveness of this approach on someone's recovery or improved overall life satisfaction. What elements of the individual's language disorder improved? Is the recovery time faster in specific target areas, or overall, or just in general? And these were just things that I was thinking of on the top of my head, but I mean, the list goes on and on, what you could probably think of, of course. These workshop therapy is open to all. I have a nice fine list here. And of course, at the bottom, I say anybody who loves poetry, because at the end of the day, I don't feel like it's really effective completely if we're holding therapy or holding workshops. I would love to be able to do this in a group setting as well, even if it's therapeutic, to integrate individuals that are neurotypical or do not identify with having non-apparent or apparent disabilities, simply because that is real life. You don't walk out of the therapy session and only see individuals that identify with disabilities. You see individuals that don't, and you want to communicate with everyone. So being able to be in that environment where everybody's there and we all get a different perspective, because it's more of an intimate space and we're being vulnerable, I just feel like that is something that could also be accomplished here in that bridging the gap. So yes, I believe this is my last slide. So my sole intention for this presentation and in speech language pathology, well, one of my intentions is to express my love for poetry through helping others creatively and informally expressing themselves, and to contribute to humanity in uncharted ways. And also I want to expose my fellow colleagues, my cohort mates, and anyone who else is interested or willing to listen, just expose the potential that we have to encourage each other to become another catalyst for change and progression in our field, especially as being Black women. I don't know if you know, but we are all brilliant. I mean, every woman is brilliant, but I just feel like because I'm in this space right now, and we have so much to offer because of our perspective and our intersection in this country, change and progression, like you said, our voice is it's not muffled, it's just not as strong as other voices right now currently in ASHA, and that is going to change. And I can say that confidently, because I'm looking at my cohort right now, and I'm going to graduate with 4 or 5 other Black women, and that's just in my cohort, and that's a big deal, especially coming from Lehman College, and we're not even going to go deep into that tea.